Okay, at this point, hopefully you've started to take a look at some of the notes here in 3.4 and 3.5 where we've started to address the product role. And hope you look through a couple of examples as well as the development of the product role. And we're now going to put this into use. So here in our example, we have x squared sine x. Now, some of the examples that you're going to see early on in the textbook would be ones that you actually could multiply out, but they're asking you to use the product rule. And that's just to kind of get you some practice with it. But here is one example with a trig function where we can't just multiply it out. So we have no option except to use the product rule. So we invoke our product rule. Product rule says we're going to take the first thing times the derivative of the second thing, if we have two things. At the end of the notes, you'll see an example where it actually shows you how to do three things. So the first thing times the derivative of the second, plus the second thing times the derivative of the first. And I really encourage you here, as you're first doing some of these, write out this step, at least for a couple of examples, a couple of problems, so you can kind of get that in your mind. It'll be there, it'll be in your notes, it'll be clear. Because I'll tell you, a lot of people fall into traps when it comes to products, and they'll neglect to use the product rule. And they'll just do the derivative of x squared, the derivative of sine, and that'll be it. So really encourage you, write out the product rule the first few times to kind of get it stuck into your mind. And then it's a process of just going ahead and doing it. So here we have x squared times the derivative of sine. Well, we know derivative of sine is cosine. Derivative of sine is cosine, and then sine times the derivative of x squared. Derivative of x squared is 2x, and usually we put the variable out front. So the derivative here would be x squared cosine x plus 2x sine x. Let's consider another example. Here we have f of x equals cosine squared of x. F of x equals cosine squared of x. Now remember what that means. Cosine squared is a shorthand notation for quantity cosine x squared. Now that is actually a composite function. We have one function inside of another one. But we haven't talked about how to do the derivatives with a composite function yet. That'll come up in a later section. And then you might say, well, I'm going to prefer to do it that way once we have that other method. For now, remember what squaring means multiplied times itself. So when it comes to derivative of cosine squared, we have to do the derivative of cosine times cosine. Well, cosine times cosine is a product. So we use our product rule. So that will be cosine x times the derivative of cosine x plus cosine x times the derivative of cosine x. Again, encourage you early on here to write these steps out. Later on, definitely leave it out. I certainly will. And so we start to work this out. Cosine x, derivative of cosine x. Well, we know derivative of cosine is negative sine. So cosine times derivative of cosine will be cosine times negative sine. Cosine times negative sine. My object here didn't pause. I thought I had a pause break in here. Plus another cosine x times another negative sine x. So altogether we have negative 2 cosine x sine x, that product. And then you might recall from trig that when you have 2 cosine x sine x, or 2 sine x cosine x, that's a double angle formula. Now the answer negative 2 cosine x sine x is fine. I mentioned that double angle formula here because sometimes your textbooks, sometimes if you follow an example, they'll just make a jump from this step to sine 2x, and you're like, what? So I just wanted to kind of remind you of that identity. So here we have two examples that involve the product rule, and here, both cases, we don't really have another option at this point. So we do have to use the product rule. Again, as I mentioned, some of the examples that you will do, some of the problems that you will do will actually be things that you could have multiplied out, First off, before going and doing the derivative. But please work through those with the product rule just to get the practice down with it, because we are going to have instances like these where we can't do it another way, and we're definitely going to have ones when we get into these composite functions in the next section as well, where we're going to have to deal with this product rule again. All right, till next time.